Hi, I'm Katie, and welcome to Hey It Gets Better. This is the podcast where I chat to people about the ups and downs of their lives and how they got to where they are now. Life can be pretty tough sometimes, there's no escaping that fact. But at Hey It Gets Better, we're all about talking about the journey. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and remember, hey, it gets better.
Hi, welcome to Hey It Gets Better. I'm joined today by Adam Brazier, who is the host of Creative Rebels, a fashion and beauty photographer, as well as the co-founder of Graffiti Life. So welcome to the podcast, Adam.
Thank you so much for having me. How's everything going?
Yeah, it's all good considering global pandemic, but how's everything with you?
Yeah, it's good. I think it's a weird one because it's like the pandemic has obviously been a really bad time for a really lot of people. But I think looking back on the past almost year it's been now, I think there's a lot of positives that I've been able to take from it personally in terms of finding more time to be creative. And I think it has allowed so many people to actually make that leap into doing a thing that they've always wanted to do. Like I think 2020 has been the year where most people have started new businesses like on record. And I think a lot of good things, despite the fact that it was such a shit year, a lot of good things have come from it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think there were like really bad moments that kind of spurred people on to take control of situations and do things like start your own business, or in my case I went freelance, and I think it was definitely a very challenging year, and it's kind of very still
Yeah.
challenging right now. But I guess I always think sometimes things have to get bad before they get better.
Yeah, well, I remember kind of get to go super political with it. I remember when Trump got elected, and there was obviously kind of like mass kind of like upset around the world about it. And like I was obviously upset too, but I was like, I know this will be good for the fact that everyone who was kind of sat on the fence before now is going to kind of come out with a voice, and then hopefully off the back of that a lot more positive things can happen. And I feel like the start of COVID was the same as well. It's like this real shit thing hit everyone, and then people had to adapt as quick as possible to be able to create something that is better for themselves. And hopefully a lot of people have learned things over the past year that they can then take forward, because I think pre-pandemic there was this pandemic of people like just burning out and kind of like working too hard, optimizing every single thing in their life. And it got to a stage where too many things were optimized, where people were just busy all the time. It's just this absolute non-stop kind of world we were living in. But this kind of like break that's happened, I feel like has made a lot of people actually stop and realize I don't need to work as hard as I've been working. I need to kind of concentrate on myself a bit more. And hopefully we can learn a lot of things from this period. And especially like in the workplace, going forward, things can get better.
Definitely, especially the amount of time I think that came with lockdown on like self-reflection,
Yeah.
and you actually had time to think, wait, why are we doing things like this way, and or like why do I get up this early and have a really long commute
Yeah.
when when it's like, I could get this extra sleep or this extra time to myself in the morning. It definitely has like allowed us to think why on a lot of things that were just considered facts.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start with this episode, as I start everyone, with this massively broad question, which you can break down however you want. And it is, what was the biggest challenge for you, or challenges for you, to get to where you are right now?
There's definitely kind of a few initial things that I can think of there. Like the first thing, kind of, if to go in chronological order, was like during like my first year of uni, like I lost my girlfriend, and that was like a really hard part of my life that was kind of just destroyed me. It was just so not what I expected. Everything was kind of happy in my life up until that point. I'd never really had any like severe like family losses or anything. And I think that was something that really kind of like shook me. It kind of really made me realize like how little time we have and how important it is to actually always work on the things that make you happy and really drive you forward. And then I think that kind of led into kind of when I'd finished university. And unfortunately, I came out of uni off the back of the last major recession. And after studying for 3 years, it was then really, really hard to get a job. I just moved down to London, and I was kind of applying for everywhere. I couldn't get anything, and coincidentally met a bunch of people and decided to start a graffiti company. This was off the back of having no experience in graffiti at all, and just kind of thought maybe this is something that could turn into a career. And it was so hard because at that point there was no money at all. Like, I was literally living off my overdraft from uni, which I remember when the bank was like, "Oh, how would you like to extend your overdraft to £3,000?" I was like, "Yes, please. That sounds absolutely amazing," and frivoled it away. And then as soon as you're kind of out in the real world where you need to pay that back and there's nothing coming in, and you've started a business but it's not making any money, yeah, those can be pretty hard times.
I can imagine that must be like, because I feel like as soon as you leave uni, real world adult money is much scarier than,
Yeah.
I feel like you get a sense of protection when you're in uni and you know that you've got your overdraft there and it's, what's the worst that can happen? But when you're like in the adult world, I keep saying it like adult world, like it's another thing.
I think it is, yeah. I think there's definitely like a what you perceive working life to be prior to actually going into that is a very different thing. I do say this having I've never really had a quote unquote proper job, because I kind of came out of uni and then just decided to start a business instead of actually going to get a job, only for the fact that there was no jobs available. I couldn't get any.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, like graduates this year, have actually found that as well coming out.
Yeah.
And we haven't had a recession, but we did have a global pandemic. So
Yeah, a recession is 100% coming because of the way that the economy currently is. So I think, now is a time of a lot of hardship. So I do really feel sorry for the people finishing uni now. But what I would say is this is the best time to start anything, because it's like if you can make it work now, as soon as the economy picks up, you're going to be absolutely flying. And a lot of people make this decision of maybe I shouldn't start a business now because the economy is bad. Maybe I'll wait till later. But actually, if you can learn to start now when there is no money going around, you get so much better at spending the money that you do have. So, for example, when we first started our business, we didn't have anything. So it was like any money that came in, we would reinvest back into the company. Like, we didn't take a wage for a really long period of time. And yeah, everything that we had, we thought, okay, well, we need to make this go as far as possible in terms of our spend. And fortunately, around this time, kind of especially a few years after, we started to kind of flick into doing a few things that were more advertising based and working for brands who would normally just throw money at stuff, but now they were being a lot more careful about how they spent their money. And that's what I think will happen going forward as well, because budgets will be tighter because they've got less money coming in. So they get a bit more clever about how they're going to spend stuff. And what worked really well about our business, Graffiti Life, is the fact that it was doing similar things to what other industries were doing, in terms of you could just put a billboard, you could just like print something out and hang it up on a wall, or you could get something hand painted. But the hand painted element has this kind of ability to really capture people and make people notice. Whereas I think a lot of, especially advertising these days, if it's in printed form, is just becomes background noise and people don't care. It's like there's a case study I always go back to. We did a big project for Microsoft years ago now, and a passerby just took a photo as we were painting it, put it on Reddit, and it got 2.2 million views in 2 days. And it's like that would not have happened if it was a printed billboard. And the cost for us to hand paint it is not significantly that much higher than what you would pay to just put up a big billboard in that place. So it's like suddenly the value of what you're selling and what you're providing is so much higher, because it actually provides more to the client. And I think if you can provide more value to the client than you're actually charging, then you've suddenly got a great service that they're going to come back to again and again and again for.
yeah, that makes complete sense. Um, I just thinking, how did you manage to keep going and stay motivated? Obviously, like when you've just started a business, you have to be in it for the long run to kind of make it work. Like how did you kind of know you would get like this big and work with such big brands?
I think we always had a vision of what could be. And I think this is where kind of me and my business partner, David, differed quite a lot, especially at the start. We're very different, we're very more on the same track now. But I always kind of visioned some form of agency in the future. I had a vision of what my office would look like. I had a picture of like a vision of a number of staff working for us and working for these bigger brands. And I think by having that kind of vision of what you know it could become or what you believe it could become really, really helps along that way. And I think anyone starting anything, if you can find someone who's doing something similar, even if it's not in the same industry, but something you think, oh, that's kind of like us, but we do this version of that, and having that vision going forward, that really helps too. And then the second thing I think is really important that definitely helped me out was just having good people around you. Like, I didn't start my business on my own. I started it with like my two business partners. And there were times when, especially when there was no money at the start, when I was just like, I just can't do this anymore. I'm going to have to go and get a normal job because it's just too hard. It's putting too much stress on my life. Like, I just can't do this. And it was having those two other people around to kind of be like, look, it's okay. We're going to get through this. Maybe you take a bit more money this month or something to kind of help you get by, pay your rent, kind of do what you need to do. But it was always having that support of kind of like my business partners and my girlfriend that kind of helped me through it. And I think having people around, if you are in a low point, is a really, really important thing to have.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it's not just even if you're starting a business and you want to, it's you're growing a business is quite tough. It's sort of anything is that you need that strong support. You need that strong support network around you to kind of just keep you going when stuff is really hard.
Yeah, 100% agree.
So as well, one thing I find really interesting is that you do multiple things. You don't just run Graffiti Life. You also have your podcast. You're a photographer, and that kind of strays away from this idea that you grow up, you get one job, and that's it. And did you always plan on having like this kind of array of jobs, or
Def- Definitely not. I think growing up, it was always, again, I say it a lot on our podcast. It's kind of, you can only become what you can see. And I think growing up in like the small town I grew up in, there was very limited things of what you actually could view your future as. So a lot, you kind of, there's the stereotypical, a great job would be to become a doctor, a lawyer, or something that was just like high paid in that profession, but wouldn't necessarily be exciting. And growing up at school, I was always really into art. Got like 100 out of 100 A star for my GCSEs, and
wow, amazing.
I always did like super super realistic stuff. I just absolutely loved it. But at no point did I ever think art was a realistic career option. Like, I was like, well, how can you make money doing art? Like, you could go and sell paintings, but I don't know anyone who's going to sell stuff. Like, in our town, there's one gallery that's like as part of the library, but there's not like an art scene here at all. So I don't know how I could possibly make money from this. So obviously that's not a route that I can go down. And I was always very good at like maths and physics and the kind of like logical kind of subjects. And I was like, well, if I picked architecture, that's kind of creative. I can like maybe draw some stuff, and then it brings in the maths and physics element of it as well. And I know that that's obviously like a high paying job. So maybe I'll go down that route instead. So I always had this vision that would be the thing that I would go and do. Like, you just go and have one job and that's your life, because that's what my parents did. That's what everyone in town did. No one ever had these multiple facets. And I think what's really interesting is, like, years later, since talking to Emma Gannon, she's got a book called The Multi-Hyphen Method, which I think is really, really good and everyone should read. But yeah, I think it kind of makes you realize actually you don't need to do just one thing. And I think one thing that I found really interesting is the fact that when we started Graffiti Life, it was like, I was an artist, so I would go and paint every day, and I'd be doing a lot of the hands-on stuff. But then as the business grew, like being an entrepreneur, you end up you stop doing the things that are like the hands-on thing, and you get other people to come and do those. And as the business grew, I was like, hold on, I've always seen myself as a creative. and I'm not really creating anything. I'm now kind of working in basically doing like the marketing and like looking after the website and doing SEO and all these different tools to try and get people to find us, but I'm actually not being creative. And I was like, this is what I love doing. Why aren't I doing this? And it was around this point where me and my girlfriend went traveling. Like, we couldn't afford to do it straight out of school, so we saved up for like a few years and took 6 months out to go around Southeast Asia. And I was like watching a lot of YouTube at this time and a lot of kind of people who made these really cool videos, and I was like, oh, I want to try and document my travels really well, just so when I look back I can have something like good to look at. So I was like, that was the point when I invested in my first camera. And it was like through traveling and like taking photos and putting them on Instagram that I started to kind of grow quite a big like following on my social media around kind of travel and that kind of thing. And then when I got back to London, I was like, this is like, that was amazing. Like, I found this creative craft that I love to do so much. And now I'm back in London, I can't do it anymore. Like, because I'm not going to see all these amazing things every day. And I kind of felt like there was still a need to go and create something. And it was through being back and having that kind of like, I'm not doing creative work, I'm not doing anything creative in my pastime, that I was like, actually, maybe I can kind of keep using this camera, but find a way to do it in London. And as an artist, I'd always done portraiture, like paintings, drawings. And I was like, oh, I wonder if I could start taking pictures of people. But at this stage, it was a really weird one for me because I was always very shy. Like, I didn't like meeting new people at all. I always felt really awkward and anxious. And but I was like, oh, but I feel like I could be good at that because I know how to compose a shot. Like, I know like how to. I'm good at taking these pictures now. I just need to try and get the confidence up to go and do this. And yeah, so started taking photos. Like, messaged a few people on Instagram and just said like, would you be interested in doing a photo shoot? A couple of people got back and said yes, and then went and did those shoots, edited the pictures, and I was like, oh, these are actually pretty good. Like, I'm really pleased with how this is going. And then that was kind of where I started just, yeah, being like, actually, you don't have to do one thing. You can start to have lots of different little things in your life that are all fulfilling.
Yeah. What I really liked, kind of like, and I picked up on there, is that you know, you took up photography when you were traveling. Like, this was after uni, and I don't know why, but I always used to think, and sometimes I even catch myself thinking this now, that I'm like, oh, it's too late for me to learn how to do this. Like, oh no, I can't learn this now. You know, I've missed that stage, and it's like, I haven't. And I think, you know, you're never too old to actually pick up a skill and learn it. And when you learn that skill, there's no reason why you can't monetize it or treat it like a business.
100%. I think like our podcast, Creative Rebels, our listeners are people as young as kind of 13, 14, all the way up to people as old as like 60, 60 plus. And we get messages from people all the time who have just started their creative endeavor. And I think that is amazing. And there is no time limit on being creative, on doing something that makes you happy. Like, if you've been working in a job that you dislike for the past 30 years, there's still time now to start a creative passion on the side and turn that into your full career. It's like, I started photography about 4 years ago now, and I'm now, if I wanted to, I could just do that full time. I don't want to because I love doing the podcast and there's lots of other things that I do as well. But it's, if you dedicate enough time to something, you can make it happen. It's just the ability to give yourself the time to do it. And that comes down to asking yourself, what is most important to me here? Like, do I actually want to give this a shot at trying something else? Or am I too busy and I'm going to say that I can't find the time to do that? Whereas I would argue that everyone has the time to do it. It's just you think other things are more important.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. One thing that's kind of always stuck with me that I've heard on your podcast, it was Emma Gannon who said this, but it was about like how long she'd been blogging
Yeah.
before like it picked up traction, and I think it was like 3 years, and it just like it hits you like, just not giving up is the key really
Yeah.
to succeed in many cases, because there are people who are probably better at you than things, but if they give up, they've got no shot and you do. And that's something where I feel like it's so important, especially we're in such a fast moving world. And I feel like when things are documented on social media and things like that, when you don't see results instantly and you don't get that kind of instant gratification, you feel something might be a failure. But I think by not giving up, you're already making that more likely to be a success.
Yeah, so there's two things you touched upon there that we talk about quite a lot in the show. So the first thing is the 3-year rule, as we call it. I kind of like to believe that whatever you're doing, whatever you're investing your time into, you give it at least 3 years for it to become successful. I feel like you have to treat it like you're doing a uni degree, where you kind of go into it thinking, okay, well, for 3 years, I'm going to have nothing. Like, it's going to be 3 years' time before I even get this certificate. Up until that point, if I leave now, I'm not going to come out with anything. So I think having that mindset of it's going to take a certain amount of time, and that's just the way it is. You're not going to be an overnight success. There is no such thing as an overnight success. With Emma Gannon there, it's like it kind of appeared like she grew really quick, but actually she had been blogging for years and years before anyone even cared about it. And I think what's great sometimes is the fact that it does take a long time to get good at something. And I think it's why a lot of people don't start, because they think, oh, well, if I put something out there that's not up to the level that I think is great, that it just won't be good enough and people are going to laugh at me and it's just bad. But actually, for the fact that if you wanted to start a YouTube channel, it's going to take you, say, 3 years before that really picks up traction and before people actually start watching it. But that gives you 3 years then that no one's really watching you to practice and get better. And I think that's a really important thing, is like realizing that you stop comparing yourself to what other people might think of you and just worry about your own progression, yourself getting better. Like, stop comparing yourself to other people, start comparing yourself to yourself 6 months ago, a year ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago. Because as soon as you start to look back, then you'll really start to see how you've progressed. And I think that's the important thing, individual progression rather than how we actually compare to everyone else around us.
I'm just like, sorry, I'm just taking like mental notes because I'm like, this is genius.
And sorry, and the second point that you touched upon there as well was giving up. And I think I think giving up is something that most people do. Most people give up when they're trying stuff, because if you think about how many professional anything there is in the world, there's only a smallish number. So I kind of believe that you can almost outperform the competition just by like outlasting them, because people will give up along the way. And I think the people who are generally left are the people who didn't give up. So if you want to be the number one chef in the world, you keep going until every other chef gives up. And you will find it gets to a stage where you've then got the experience because you've been going for so long. And there's not many other people who have also been going for that long as well. So the experience and skill you have and the amount of people who are left doing that, you get in this situation where you can't help but win, because you've kind of got the best of both worlds.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And I think as well, like you're saying, if you compare yourself as well, then you're seeing like how much you improve. I think I do it myself. I spent so much time comparing to myself to other podcasts.
Yeah, and we live in a world that is everyone's on a completely different rung of the ladder. Everyone starts in a completely different place. People are from completely different backgrounds. Like, people start with certain amounts of wealth, others don't. And a lot of times you can't see that on the surface. Like, you don't know how much money people have in the background, or how much their parents have, or things like that, or the connections that their parents might have that might give them that kind of step up. And so I think that's why comparison can become so damaging, because it's like, if you start to look at all your friends around you and think, oh, well, they've all got houses, they're all driving nice cars, and then think, well, did they pay the full deposit on that house themselves? Like, is this just their thing, or has their family helped them? Because often you'll find that there's probably something else going on that you don't really know about. So as soon as you start to worry less about what's happening around you with that, and just think, am I progressing personally? Then I think it's a much more healthy place to be in.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I especially think as well as a consequence of uni, because uni is one of those kind of weird places where
Yeah,
you have so many people from different backgrounds, different like socioeconomic backgrounds, people with different, like their parents have different amounts of money, that are in one place, and you all become friends, you get to know each other. And then when now uni is over, it's very strange because everyone's got completely different things going on in the background,
yeah.
yet in your head you came from the exact same place. So why is it different? But you have to think about the stuff in their lives as well.
Yeah, I think I've never really thought about that, but there is definitely a difference between school and university in terms of school is generally the people around you. There will be richer people, poorer people, but it won't be as extreme as when you go to university, because then you're going to get people mixed from different parts of the country with complete different wealths, because there's not like private school for university.
Yeah,
So it's like everyone's in these same bubbles. And but then I suppose that is the closest to what the real world is like. That's where you really get to see that things are really different. And actually, people are going to have a head up on you. And some people are always going to have a nicer house than you. But that doesn't matter. And there's nothing you can do to change that. You just need to be more happy with what you have.
yeah, I think focusing on yourself is really like the key to like, because if you're just so distracted by what everyone else is doing, not only are you kind of like comparing yourself to them, but you're taking away time that you can actually spend working on yourself.
Yeah. I think like time, and that really interests me because I think a lot of people spend too much time worrying about these little things that they can't really change, or little things that are like hacks. When people are get really obsessed with productivity and they've spent
Yeah,
the past 3 weeks reading books, listening to podcasts about how to increase their productivity, whereas actually if they had just gone and made some work, they would be one step further ahead than they are now. And I think people get too worried about this optimization and making everything perfect rather than just doing the work, doing the craft, doing whatever it is that's going to get you closer to where you need to be.
definitely. And that reminds me of so you know Clubhouse. I think you're on it. Can't
Yeah.
remember if you are. I think I follow you, but I remember when it came out, I spent so many hours on it, listening to people talk, listening to business people and stuff. And there was good moments in it, and I got some like ideas from things and everything. But it hit me that I spent probably a whole week just hearing what other people were doing and
Yeah.
not creating anything.
Okay. Yeah. So there's a really interesting thing that I heard on a podcast. That was, are you a creator or are you a consumer? And I think having that mindset of like, which one are you? Are you the kind of person who consumes things or creates stuff? Because as soon as you can get into that mindset of acknowledging and analyzing what you actually do, because then it kind of, you might think, actually, well, the last 2 weeks, all I've done is consume, I've not created anything. So what you can do is try and put some limitations on yourself, like, well, for every piece of content I consume, I'm going to create a piece, or every 5 pieces I consume, I'm going to create a piece. So then that really makes you analyze how you're spending your time. Because if you're going to go and watch an episode of Netflix in the evening, it's like, have you created something to earn that? And then it kind of changes that balance of like how you're actually spending your time, and it makes you appreciate the value of it a bit more.
That's really interesting. I also find as well, since because this is really weird, but I never thought of myself as like a creative or like a freelancer. Well, but especially creative until recently, because in my head I was like, what am I creating? I don't draw anything. And I always thought like in terms of like art. And I think I think I've heard you call yourself so many things in this podcast, and the moment I kind of took ownership of like what I was doing, like I create things, I consume content like differently to how I used to.
And I think that's when things really start to get interesting, when you start to treat life like inspiration, and like putting yourself in situations where you can get its inspiration from. Because it's like you can get, for example, if I go and walk around, like, well, when was that? It's during the gap between a couple of the lockdowns. I went down to the National Gallery for the morning, and I'd not been there for years. And I went there to just get inspiration. And most people in that room would just be walking around there for the sake of just going to look at some paintings. But I went there with the intention of, I'm going to go here to get some inspiration, to learn stuff. And so I basically walked around the gallery and just thought, okay, I'm only going to really concentrate on pictures or paintings that catch my attention in some way. And then I'd go up to those paintings and I'm like, what about this do I like? What stands out in this? And I'd take pictures of anything that I thought that's interesting. And then by the end of kind of walking around the gallery, I had a big collection of photos on my phone that were all things that had caught my attention. And then I kind of like took them back, looked at them, and I was like, what is there any kind of common themes between these? Started to notice a few kind of color palettes. So I was like, oh, actually, yeah, they've all got these similar kind of muted tones here. I kind of like this. And then I was like, okay, well, how can I bring that to my photography? How can I add these colors and elements that I've got inspired by these like Renaissance paintings and add them into what I'm doing now? So then started to develop a few different ways to kind of edit my colors and really like tweak stuff, and then came up with like a new kind of like layer of kind of coloring that I'll put on my photos every single time I do them now. And that wouldn't have happened unless I'd gone out to try and get that inspiration in the first place. I would have still been editing how I was before. So I think it's having that intent before you go into something, thinking, what am I going to get out of this? It's like I recently rewatched the Matrix trilogy, and I went into that thinking, okay, I wonder if I can get any kind of things that I can find that are linked to our podcast in this, or can I get anything in terms of the cinematography from this I could then use for my photography? And just having that going into a film gives you such a different perspective on what you're watching compared to just passively watching for entertainment, that yeah, it's just such an interesting little thing.
Yeah, I completely see like where you're coming from. And it's kind of like you're your own you teach yourself as well. If you do that, you're, as you grow older and you want to consume these new skills, you have the question of like, how do I learn them? Where do I learn them? There's no traditional like school curriculum.
Yeah.
But by going to a gallery, you were able to teach yourself something. And I think that as you grow up, you need to learn to become your own teacher. And obviously, you can do like online classes and things like that. But there's something really kind of good about learning things your own way.
Yeah. See, I would argue that and say it's not as you grow up. I think from an early age, you need to start teaching yourself. You need to be as curious as possible. Whatever age you are listening to this now, you need to start finding ways to learn yourself and find, because it's like if you have an interest in something, you're going to then go in and start looking at that and hopefully learning it. So if you had an interest in baking and you started to go, I'm going to get a couple of recipes and try these out. It's like all throughout my life, I've always been curious and always thought, oh, I wonder how you do that. Like back to when I first kind of started using Photoshop was when I had like MySpace back in the day. And you used to be able to really like customize your profiles and like overlay stuff on there. So it was through doing that that I learned how to use Photoshop and how to do like HTML coding for websites just to edit this profile. And it's having that curiosity of like, oh, can I do this? And then as soon as you realize, can I do this? You try it, you learn it. Yes, that worked. You get into this cycle of anytime you see something that interests you, then you think, oh, can I do that? But then you have the confidence that you can do it because you've done it before. And I think that's why when I started photography and like whatever I start next, it will be a success because I know that I can go and learn it because I've got the confidence to go into that. So I think earlier you can get into a stage of teaching yourself things, seeing a result from that, and then teaching yourself something new, seeing a result. And it's just this cycle. You get so much confidence that can go into everything else in your life. And that's one thing that I feel like has really helped me with everything that I've ever done is, yeah, just never relying on someone else to teach me something. Always realizing, actually, if I want to learn it, I can go and do that myself.
Yeah, sorry, it's just making me think a lot as well, that it's like when you do it yourself, as there's no so what I think is that when we are growing up in school and stuff, I know that I definitely got sort of like gratification. I got my self-worth from my grades.
Yeah.
I was very academic, but then I don't know if this was a good thing or not, because I put all my self-worth based on what my grades were, which meant I was very, very anxious going into exams and things like that. And towards the end of uni, I remember we were in like a seminar talking about mental health, and the lecturer was like, oh, and another way to deal with stress is to have hobbies. And I was just struck because I was like, I don't have any hobbies. I
Yeah.
don't do anything. All my self-worth and my identity came from my academic side. And I think when I started to podcast, I I got this whole new sense of self-worth, but it wasn't through like a grade or anything. It was because I was doing it myself and learning it.
Yeah, that is so, so important. And I'm so glad that you have found your thing as well, because I know a lot of people are in a situation where they still don't have that hobby. They don't have that thing that they're like, this is the thing that's for me. And so much of that comes down to kind of going back and being younger and being like, well, for me, I always had that thing. So I've always, in that sense, been lucky. But I think it is really important to just try as many things as possible. Like we talk a lot about finding your passion. And I feel like that phrase now has got so used that everyone now feels a pressure to find a passion. And what if you're in a situation where you feel like, actually, I don't know what I want to do with my life? Like, firstly, don't worry, because so many people out there are exactly the same. But you just need to start allocating time in your life to trying new things. It's like we've had a podcast for like 2 years now. And when we first started that, I was originally I started it as the producer. Like episode 1, I was supposed to just be the producer on the episode. I wasn't supposed to talk, but I was supposed to kind of like come in just in case David needed help in case he like ran out of stuff to say or something. Whereas actually by episode 2, I was like, hold on, give me a mic, because I feel like there were so many things in that conversation that I wanted to jump in on. But if you just said to me like 2 years ago or 3 years ago that you're going to be like podcasting is going to be one of your main jobs, I'd have said like, no way. Like, I don't even like the sound of my own voice. Like, well, how the hell am I going to like talk for ages? Like, I can't succinctly say anything without saying and like and all the filler words a million different times. But as soon as you start doing it, and then I was like, oh, actually, I really enjoy doing this. This is actually really fun. Like to sit and have these great conversations with great people all the time. This is like invigorating. And it is just a matter of going out there and trying new things, like trying stuff that you wouldn't expect you would like. And you might try them and you don't like them. And that's completely fine too, because that just means there's one less thing you need to try now to find out what it is you actually love to do. But it is just a matter of trying things again and again and again and giving them a good period of time as well, because I think it's very easy to give stuff a little go and then just kind of suck it off, being like, oh, no, I'm not interested in that. It's not for me. But like, if you think about every single painter, every single artist, every single dancer, every single poet, every single creative of any kind started off at 0. Everyone was rubbish at some point. And you have to go through a stage of being really bad before you get good. And you just need to try and find the little things that are within that kind of bad work that you're creating that you enjoy doing. And it almost doesn't matter too much, especially at the start, about the quality of the end result, as long as you're enjoying the process of doing. Because at the end of the day, it's the process that is the thing that you're going to fall in love with. It's not the end piece. It's like if I'm making doing a photo, then like obviously I'm like, when it's finished and it's edited, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm pleased with that. But that's not the point of the process that I love. It's the meeting people, having that conversation, creating stuff together, then kind of going through the images, working out which ones look good, then thinking about how am I going to edit this and how can I bring out the colors here? How can I compose this shot? It's the process that's the fun part. It's almost like when you've got the photo finished and posted on Instagram, that's kind of like, oh, well, that's a shame. That bit's over now. But now I'm going to start the process again, because if you can find love in the process, that's more important than finding love in the end goal. And just to kind of go a bit more deeper on that, I think that's where a lot of people in their lives don't enjoy the process. They don't enjoy their day-to-day life. Everyone's striving for this future version of themselves where they've got a house, they've got a car, they've got several kids, they've got some dogs, and everything's kind of like, oh, well, one day I'll be happy when I've achieved that. But I think what's interesting is the amount of people that we've talked to on our show who have all those things. We've talked to like multiple millionaires and none of them are happy. It's really weird. Like all the people who've achieved what if you spoke to them 15 years ago, what would be my dream, that like as soon as I get there I'm going to be happy? Everyone who's hit that says it's not that makes them happy. It's the process of getting there. It's the process of doing the thing they love to do every day that keeps them going.
Yeah, that makes that just makes complete sense. And I think it's so funny you saying this, and I'm literally sat next to this drawing I've been doing for weeks that looks horrific. But it's like I'm doing it not because it like looks great. I'm doing it because it's something I want to learn, and it's something that I'm going to take time to teach myself, and it's an outlet as well that allows me to be creative and to just make things, and that's the process that I love. And I think you don't get taught this stuff in school, and in a sense as well, when you grow up, a lot of it is also in like careers talks and stuff. It's about like what salary do you want? It's about like earning the money, and no one really
Yeah.
talks about how you feel. Like, do you want to earn this like load of money if you hate your job? And when you ask it like that, it's quite easy to be like, oh, probably not actually.
Yeah. So we have this goal of like, yeah, I need to earn loads of money because money comes from happiness. And I was listening to something the other day and they were like, money can make you happier, but it won't make you happy. And I think it's having that idea of life is actually pretty short and you should enjoy as much of it as possible. And if you kind of don't go to bed in the evening thinking, oh, I can't wait to wake up tomorrow, then something needs to change. And it's like I go to bed in the evening and I'm itching. So I'm like, oh, I can't wait to get up tomorrow because I know I've got this shoot or I need to edit these pictures and I'm like really looking forward to it. And obviously that doesn't happen every day. If I know I've got to wake up tomorrow and do my taxes, I'm going to be like, oh, can't be bothered. But there has to be like so many days that happen in a row that are you wanting to get up. And if you've been for like the past month and you've thought, oh, actually, I can't be bothered to wake up tomorrow, or you're kind of putting off going to sleep because you know that tomorrow's I've got work, then it's like you need to start trying to find a way out of that. And that might not be a quick process. That might take you the next 5-10 years. But I think it's the important thing is to make a start in heading in a direction that's going to make you happier, because it's that's going to leave you feeling happy and fulfilled, not the big house that you thought maybe one day I'll want.
I'm really glad that you said, it's not going to necessarily be a quick process, because I think sometimes when you hear this advice, you try it for a bit and you wake up and it's like, okay, well, it's not worked. And I
Yeah.
think this isn't a quick fix. It's like a complete mindset shift that you have to have.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing as well. The fact that no one is so happy every day. No one's smiling every single moment of every single day, being like, this is so good. Because it's like if you were living like that, like chemically, you get a dopamine rush, and that's what makes you happy. You kind of get this little endorphin rush to your head, being like, this is good. But everything's got a balance. So obviously, you can't live on that ultimate happiness, but otherwise you'd have some massive chemical imbalance. But it's like not hating the process. I think that's probably the best thing to describe it as, and like finding little things in your day that you enjoy doing. And I think a good way to kind of realize, like, do you enjoy something, and is this something that you should be striving for, is do you experience flow state at any point whilst doing that? Because I think as soon as you can get into flow state, which is that kind of where you just feel like time's absolutely flown by and you've just been enjoying doing what you've been doing, then I feel like that's what we should all be aiming for, to find these little moments of time that our minds can just like do their thing. And it's almost meditative in the way that you're just creating something. Like it happens a lot with me, like especially if I'm like drawing or painting, or even when I'm editing photos, actually, you kind of go into this little state of just kind of you're just kind of going through it, doing a bit of this, doing a bit of that, and you're kind of enjoying the process. It's not like a huge smile on my face, like I'm just in absolute like ecstatic doing this, but it's just kind of, yeah, this is nice. It's kind of like being sat by a nice view somewhere that's just like, yeah, this is just really nice.
Yeah, I think it's being content. I feel like
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
I can't remember where I read this. It's like, sometimes, you don't have to be super happy. It's like enough just to be content. And I think that is like the goal. Just be content with what you do. So thank you so much for this episode. There's just like so many nuggets of wisdom in it. I'm gonna have to like make 1,000 promo pieces. Just the amount of quotes in there, I'm just like, oh my god, this is genius. But I'm gonna leave you with a chance to say one more thing, and this is the last question I ask everyone, which is, you know, if someone feels like life doesn't get better, they're in a rut right now, they don't know what they're doing, maybe they hate their job or they don't know what job they need to get, what would you say to that person?
I would say it does fucking get better. You just need to put in the work to get there, because no one else, like you're they say all the time, like you are the CEO of your own life. Like you're in control of your own life, and it's you who's going to be the one who makes the decision to put the time in to make yourself happier, to give yourself a better life. Don't expect the world to be kind to you and just give you everything that you want. The world owes you nothing. You have to go and make it for yourself. And that might sound like harsh words, but it's completely up to you. Like your future is completely in your hands. You need to make the decision to make that leap, and no one else can do it for you.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. I hope you found it helpful. I really appreciate all the support I get for Hey It Gets Better. It would be amazing if you could subscribe to our channel wherever you listen to your podcast. If you want some more content, then you can always follow us on Instagram at Hey It Gets Better. And for more stories of inspiration and resources to help you get through life, visit our website, heyitgetsbetter.com. I hope you have a wonderful week. And remember, hey, it gets better.